Hi everybody, welcome to our podcast on the respiratory system. In this one we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about some comparative respiratory anatomy and physiology, so without further ado. So we've talked a little bit about some of the systems here, and I just wanted you guys to get an appreciation for the fact that none of these systems work independently from each other. They work totally in conjunction instead with each other. So everything that goes on has an effect from one system to the next. So things like when we spend our time with the circulatory system, that is really the just method of transport to get everything that our cells need to them. And so things like the digestive system, that's responsible for taking in food, for taking in water, being able to move those nutrients through and get them to the cells from the circulatory system. Whereas respiratory is purely involved with taking in oxygen, getting it to the circulatory system so it gets to the cells, and also responsible for waste removal, getting CO2 out and then eliminating it. So that's really how it's involved. And then you have the urinary system, which is very important in regulating water, taking care of concentrating and getting rid of those blood wastes out through and filtered through the kidneys. So that's really just to give you guys a little bit of an insight as to how they work together. We all know that there is a dual definition of respiration. So as we talk about this, we spent a while ago spending a ton of time on cell respiration. Now we're talking about respiratory system. So just kind of keep that in mind that there is this dual definition, right? We have the exchange of gases between our internal and external environment. That's the respiration we're going to talk about. There's also cell respiration, which is about breakdown of glucose so that we can build up ATP. Just there you have it. Oxygen intake is directly related to the energy that's expended. We know this because of cell respiration. Oxygen is a key ingredient, right? And reminding ourselves that it is the final electron acceptor at the end of the ETS. So that very last piece of cell respiration, that's where oxygen is going to accept all of those electrons that have been bounced through so we can move those hydrogens to build up ATP. Okay, so metabolism, obviously pretty key. Okay, so diffusion and air pressure. How do we move the air that has all of this oxygen in it and get it to the tissues that it needs? Okay, and it's going to be a direct result of the air pressure that we have. Okay, so oxygen, carbon dioxide exchange directly through diffusion, and you guys are well versed in what that process is. So I'm sure I don't even have to get into it right now. Aren't you guys smart? Love it. Okay, so when we talk about this, we're talking about this exchange where we have a lot of gas mixtures. So the total gas pressure that we have is a result of a mixture, which is the sum of all of the separate gases put together. Our air is not just pure oxygen. It's a combination of multitudes of gases. So we'll take a little bit of a look at that. We're also going to bring in a little physics here. So the pressure that we have of each gas is proportional to its concentration, and that's called Fick's law. Okay, so the pressure is proportional to the concentration, okay, which seems, it makes sense, right? So let's talk a little bit about what dry air looks like in terms of percentage volumes. So we have nitrogen, and nitrogen is our most abundant element in our air. It's at 77%. Oxygen is at 21%. So this is the big one. This is our normal air we breathe. It's composed of 21% oxygen. Okay, so which is why we're built for that. We're not built for pure oxygen. That would be if things were going really, really south, health-wise. Would you ever be in the need for anything like that to be able to uptake? Or you were either really, really in really, really high extreme altitudes. We have some argon, and then we have other gases, hydrogen, helium, ozone, radon, methane, and some will argue that it's the methane that's increasing due to greenhouse emissions. All right, so methane going up, and carbon dioxide. Okay, we've got all of these critters breathing out, so carbon dioxide is very low, but it stays low and we hope it will maintain staying low because we've got all the plants that suck it up for photosynthesis. So it's really key that we keep that low. Again, that's another thing we see on the increase that we feel is the result of, that is one of, I should say, not the result, but the cause of global warming. So let's take a look at that idea of fixed law. So if atmospheric pressure at sea level, which we are not, by the way, at sea level is about 760 millimeters of mercury, then the partial pressure of O2, which we call the, PP, partial pressure, is directly proportional. So we take that percentage, 0.21, okay, times 760, and we know that that total atmospheric pressure is built up of 159.6 millimeters of mercury. Okay, so there's your equation right there. You've got the total, right? So if I have my total right here, okay, my percentage of O2 right here, then I know that of that pressure, the pressure that's caused by oxygen is 159.6. All right, so keeping that same idea, I want you to calculate what the partial pressure of nitrogen would be then. And that's going to be question 1 on your WISC. So I want you to work through and figure that out, and that's what's going to be your WISC. So we know that the diffusion piece is going to be really important. So if I have a high pressure, okay, pressure causes a gradient, just like gravity does, just like concentration does, okay, pressure is a gradient force too. So if I have a high pressure, we're going to move it to a low pressure. So let's look at some of these systems, a little comparative anatomy. Low efficiency of energy capture from glucose without oxygen. Here's the question. Without oxygen, how many ATPs per molecule of glucose do we get? Do you remember? Here's a hint. It's not much. So without oxygen, we are looking at 4 ATP molecules. Versus, do you guys remember how many we make when it's cell respiration? And we have oxygen, and we go through the whole process in the mitochondria? Yeah, we're looking at about 38 ATP molecules. So without oxygen, super, super, super low efficiency. Okay, and we're going to bring back a whole lot of earlier concepts from the beginning of the year. And if you recall too, diffusion is effective for what kind of distances? When is it really, really effective? Right? Diffusion is only effective for short distances. Okay, only, right? We don't want to go really far. So the key is lots of surface area compared to the volume. And that's the idea of fixed law as well. Okay, that pressure piece and that proportionness to it. So if I have a lot of surface area compared to the volume, I can have some pretty effective diffusion. Diffusion's really effective in an inactive body mass, right? Because you don't have the demand for oxygen. So if you're pretty much a couch potato or a slug, you're not going to expend a whole lot of energy. It's also not going to be really good for you either. You also need a transport system, okay? And this is reliant on bulk flow. That's how we take in our air, okay? We don't want to be, trying to suck air in through a straw. Okay, we want to be able to have huge amount of bulk flow, really, really effective way of diffusing a lot of material. Let's look at the earthworm. They have their capillaries directly underneath their skin, and they literally will absorb oxygen right there, okay, which is pretty cool. Oxygen comes up to the surface of the skin, released at O2 pore areas throughout the body, okay? So it's diffuses in from the air directly from the skin right into the capillary, okay, and then sends it along. So what you don't have are like a set of lungs, you don't have a trachea, you don't have all of that in an earthworm. It literally just diffuses from the air right into the body. Opposite with CO2. That CO2 is going to come back up to the surface, okay, and gets released from the capillary at the skin and out, okay? And this is really, really important. That's why they have to stay moist. Okay, that moisture is really, really key right there. Because without that, they're going to find that they're not going to be able to mobilize their and move those gases very effectively. Woo! All right, so let's look at some insects. Okay, so we're going to go from being, kind of work our way through a little bit more complicated systems. Insects actually have a tracheal type system so that they can move air in actual tube-like systems versus straight up diffusion because, with insects, a little bit different than an earthworm, they have an exoskeleton. So that exoskeleton is going to prevent that direct diffusion across, okay? And so they create, or have, over time developed this tracheal system with tubes just like this, and you can see them how they create these tubes, right, and they come out to the end where they're going to be able to pick up, okay, the air and bring it out. So that tracheal system is a build out or an extension from their exoskeleton, opens at these tiny little narrowing holes, okay, and then heads it out to all the cells in the body. Through bulk flow from the outside gradients and pressure changes, that will pull air in and pull in and then push CO2 out. Other arthropods can use things like book lungs or book gills. So what I'm really interested in telling you guys about tonight gets into gills. Now, all of your fish, your bony fish and your I can never say it, cartilaginous fish have them as well. Those are your sharks, your lampreys. Those don't have bony skeletons. They have cartilage instead. These guys have gills, and gills are extraordinarily cool because they insane amounts of surface area to be able to diffuse oxygen in. So I wanted to really showcase some gills a little bit before we get into our lungs. Gills are outgrowths of thin tissue, okay, and they increase huge amounts of surface area. And again, that surface area is so key. So we get tons of surface area. You get all the way out, and so much surface area that you get out to a 1 cell thick layer that gets exposed to the environment, okay? And obviously we're talking about fish here, so there's really no worries, right, about maintaining moisture here. They won't dry out because they're fish, right? Oxygen levels in the water are actually really, really low. There's only about 7 parts per million, or actually a little less than that in the water. Different partial pressures exist, okay, of oxygen that allow the diffusion into the blood. And it works through what we call a countercurrent exchange. So the actual blood flow and the flow of the water are running in different directions. So let me show you how this works, because this is really cool. If they actually exchanged with the current, it would be so less efficient because you would run basically you'd actually hit like an equilibrium and you would get no exchange of oxygen. Okay, so if I look here at the same current, so I'm right here right now, okay, notice water's coming in, here's my blood, okay, here's my blood has no oxygen, here's 100%, oh wow, here, and then as it's going across, okay, this water is losing its oxygen, okay, less and less and less, but all of a sudden you hit a place where you're reaching, oh shoot, 50-50. Now I have equilibrium, there's going to be no more exchange, okay? Super inefficient for the fish, okay? So over time, this countercurrent exchange has developed, and watch how cool this is, okay? Because of the countercurrent exchange, they are going to run into an issue of diffusion problems, okay? So the percent O2 in the blood, okay, so here's my blood flow. I've got low oxygenated blood coming in. Water is going this way, right? So by the time I hit here, okay, I'm still going to have, it's just going to have reached equilibrium towards the end of it versus being halfway through, okay? So even though it starts out here, okay, I'm going to always have a higher concentration of O2 in the water than I do in the blood of the fish. So it's really, really key. So that's why it's so much more effective, so that we don't run out of oxygen. And so here's an actual picture of what's going on in the fish, okay? Right now we're in chapter 40 of your text, so feel free to check this out too. So the water comes in through the mouth, so that's how it flows. So the water flows in this way, well, not through its eyeball, you get it through the mouth. And it flows all the way open. That's why fish always have their mouths open, okay? And it flows through the gill slits, all through here, and that's the direction of the water. Okay, so if I break that open and I actually look at the water flowing, so the water flows in, okay, and it flows and it's getting pulled across these gills, okay, and if I even take a closer look, here's what's happening. Capillary beds lay within these folds, water's coming across, here's my countercurrent exchange, okay, here's my oxygen poor blood coming in, here's my capillary bed. So here's where the exchange is going to happen. Oxygen coming in, oxygen coming in, oxygen coming in, and it comes out to head to the rest of the body. Same thing going on here with this capillary bed. Oxygen coming in, oxygen coming in, oxygen coming in, hits an artery and heads around to the rest of the body. This would be just a slide. Basically just what we would see on our scopes. So excuse me for that. It's not like a scanning or anything like that. So you can see the capillaries. Here's the blood flow. These are all red blood cells. Oh, I want you to note, notice here, this is a red blood cell. fish and birds, okay, and reptiles, their red blood cells are nucleated, all right, unlike mammals, okay? So that's a normal red blood cell to have a nucleus like that. So there's red blood cells. Here's my capillaries coming in. See that one cell layer thick? Okay, so only one cell at a time comes in. So water's going to flow right through here, and it's going to be able to diffuse right across to be able to pick up that oxygen. So the advantage to this is a complete continuous flow of oxygen over the respiratory surface. Okay, so with that, I'm going to finish there, and we'll spend a little bit more time getting back into the lungs as we review that step as well. So take it easy, and we'll catch you later in class.